A young billionaire leaves a corporate building late at night, feeling empty despite his fortune. On the way, he kicks over a cardboard box and is startled to hear a sound coming from inside. When he opens it, he finds a small girl, dirty and shivering with cold, awakening something in him that he has never felt before. That night, which began as just another business failure, would change the course of his life and his heart forever. If this story interested you, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and tell us what city you're watching us from. We'll keep going. The winter wind cut through Manhattan like a knife, slicing between the towering skyscrapers that defined the New York skyline. Ethan Reed stood at the window of his penthouse office on the 87th floor, watching the tiny figures moving on the streets below. From this height, people looked like ants, insignificant, anonymous, expendable, just the way Ethan had built his empire, by seeing numbers instead of faces. At 32, Ethan was the youngest billionaire in the financial technology sector. His company, Quantum Capital, had revolutionized algorithmic trading, making him the golden boy of Wall Street. Tonight, however, the champagne in his crystal glass tasted bitter. The board meeting had been a disaster. His latest acquisition proposal, a bold move to absorb a struggling competitor, had been met with resistance. "Mr. Reed," his assistant's voice crackled through the intercom, "your car is waiting." Ethan drained his glass and grabbed his cashmere coat. The elevator descended in silence, each floor representing another million in his portfolio. When he reached the lobby, his driver was waiting, umbrella in hand. "Not tonight, Marcus," Ethan said, waving him off. "I need to walk." Marcus raised an eyebrow, but knew better than to argue. "It's freezing out there, sir." "Good," Ethan replied. Perhaps the cold would make him feel something, anything. The December air assaulted him as he stepped onto the sidewalk. Snow had begun to fall, dusting the city in a deceptive blanket of purity. Ethan walked without direction, his Italian leather shoes crunching on the salted pavement. His mind raced with numbers, projections, strategies, the language he understood best. 3 blocks from his office, he entered a less prestigious neighborhood. Here the sidewalks weren't cleared as frequently, and the buildings lacked doormen. Ethan barely noticed the transition, lost in mental calculations about market shares and leverage points. His foot connected with something solid, a cardboard box pushed against a building wall. The impact sent it skidding a few feet. Ethan would have continued walking, but a sound froze him in place. A whimper, soft, almost imperceptible, but unmistakably human. Ethan approached the box cautiously. It was large, the kind used for refrigerator. Shipments with fragile stamped on its side in faded red letters. The irony wasn't lost on him as he peeled back the damp flap. Inside, curled into a tight ball, was a child, a little girl, no more than 4 years old, with matted blonde hair and dirt-streaked cheeks. Her lips were blue, her thin frame shivering violently despite her unconscious state. She wore what might have once been a pink dress, now reduced to filthy rags that provided no protection against the bitter cold. "Jesus Christ," Ethan whispered, his breath forming clouds in the freezing air. Without thinking, he shrugged off his $12,000 coat and wrapped it around the tiny form. The child didn't stir as he lifted her. She weighed almost nothing in his arms, a feather of humanity against his chest. For a man who routinely made decisions involving billions of dollars, Ethan suddenly found himself paralyzed with indecision. His phone. He needed to call someone, but who? The police, child services, an ambulance? The girl shuddered in his arms, a violent tremor that decided for him. Medical help first, questions later. "Siri, nearest hospital," he commanded his phone. "The nearest hospital is Mount Sinai West, 1.2 miles from your location. Too far to walk with a freezing child." Ethan stepped into the street, frantically waving at passing cabs with one arm while holding the girl against his chest with the other. 3 empty taxis sped past before one finally pulled over. "Mount Sinai West, as fast as you can," Ethan ordered as he climbed in, cradling the small bundle. The driver glanced in his rearview mirror, eyes widening at the sight of the disheveled child in the arms of a man in a bespoke suit. "Is she okay?" "Just drive," Ethan snapped before adding, "Please, it's an emergency." The taxi lurched into traffic, weaving between cars with an urgency that matched Ethan's own racing heart. During the ride, he found himself doing something he hadn't done in years: praying. Not to any specific deity, but to whatever forces might help this anonymous child survive. The emergency room was chaotic, a symphony of beeping machines and urgent voices. Ethan burst through the doors, the girl still wrapped in his coat. "Help!" he called out, his commanding boardroom voice cracking slightly. "I found her in a box on the street. She's not waking up." A nurse rushed forward, followed by a doctor. They took the child from his arms, unwrapping her with professional efficiency and transferring her to a gurney. Ethan felt strangely bereft as they wheeled her away, his arms suddenly empty, his expensive coat forgotten on the hospital floor. "Sir, we need some information," a woman in scrubs approached with a clipboard. "I don't have any," Ethan replied, his eyes still fixed on the doors through which they'd taken the girl. "I literally just found her in a cardboard box. I don't know her name, age, nothing." The woman, her badge identified her as Dr. Patel, studied him with a mix of suspicion and concern. "And you are?" "Ethan Reed." He offered his business card. Automatically, a reflex from years of networking, Dr. Patel's eyebrows rose slightly as she read it. "The Ethan Reed of Quantum Capital." He nodded impatiently. "How is she? The girl?" "We're assessing her now. Severe hypothermia, definitely. Possible malnutrition." Dr. Patel's professional demeanor softened slightly. "It's good you found her when you did, Mr. Reed. Another hour in this weather." She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't need to. "Social services will need to be contacted," she continued. "Since she appears to be abandoned—" "She's not abandoned," Ethan interrupted, surprising himself with his vehemence. "She was lost or forgotten. Someone must be looking for her." Dr. Patel gave him a look that suggested she'd seen too much of humanity's darker side to share his optimism. "Nevertheless, protocol must be followed. I'll need you to speak with our social worker and the police." The word police jolted Ethan back to reality. This wasn't his world, his problem. He had a company to run, billions to manage, a board to placate. What was he doing in a hospital emergency room at 11 at night, advocating for a homeless child? Yet when a harried-looking social worker named Amanda Diaz appeared an hour later, Ethan found himself recounting every detail of his discovery, answering questions and, most surprisingly, asking questions of his own. "What happens to her now?" he asked after signing his statement. Ms. Diaz sighed, the weight of an overloaded system evident in her expression. "Once she's medically stable, if no family member comes forward, she'll go to an emergency foster placement until a more permanent solution can be found." "Emergency foster, you mean tonight?" "Possibly, though given her condition, the doctors may want to keep her for observation." "And then what? Where does she go?" "Ms." Diaz studied him curiously. "Mr. Reed, while I appreciate your concern, cases like this are unfortunately common. The system will take over now." The system. Ethan knew all about systems, their efficiencies and their failures. He'd exploited both to build his fortune. The thought of this small, vulnerable child being processed by an impersonal bureaucracy suddenly seemed unbearable. "What if," he began, the words forming before the thought was fully realized, "what if I wanted to help her?" "Help her?" Ms. Diaz repeated cautiously. "Yes. Financially, I mean. Medical expenses, whatever she needs." It was a safe offer, the kind rich, people made to assuage guilt, throwing money at problems from a comfortable distance. But even as he spoke, Ethan knew it wasn't enough. The image of those blue lips, that tiny body shivering in a cardboard box on one of the wealthiest streets, in one of the wealthiest cities in the world, it had shaken something loose inside him. Before Ms. Diaz could respond, a doctor approached. Them. "Mr. Reed, the child is stabilized. She's still unconscious, but her body temperature is rising and her vitals are improving." "Can I see her?" The question escaped before Ethan could censor it. The doctor hesitated, looking to Ms. Diaz, who nodded reluctantly. Briefly, she conceded. They led him to a curtained area where the little girl lay on a hospital bed that dwarfed her small frame. Tubes and wires connected her to various machines that beeped rhythmically. Her face, cleaned of dirt, revealed delicate features and pale skin. Someone had combed her hair, exposing its true color, a soft honey blonde. Without the grime and in the harsh hospital lights, she looked even younger than he'd initially thought. "We estimate she's about 4 years old," the doctor said softly, as if reading his mind. "Severely malnourished, but no signs of physical abuse. She's dehydrated, hypothermic, and exhausted, but children are resilient. With proper care, she should recover." Proper care. The words echoed in Ethan's mind as he stood beside the bed, watching the slow rise and fall of her chest beneath the hospital blanket. In his world, problems were solved with money, power, or influence, often all three. But this situation required something he wasn't sure he possessed. Nevertheless, as he studied the child's face, a strange certainty settled over him. He couldn't walk away from this, not now, not after carrying her tiny, cold body against his chest, not after feeling her heartbeat flutter beneath his hands like a trapped bird. For the first time in years, Ethan Reed was about to make a decision that had nothing to do with profit margins or market share, and it terrified him. Morning arrived, with harsh fluorescent clarity. Ethan had spent the night in an uncomfortable chair beside the child's bed, his neck stiff, his thoughts racing. His phone buzzed incessantly, missed calls from his executive assistant, text messages about the board meeting fallout, emails marked urgent. The outside world continued to spin, while his had momentarily stopped. A nurse entered, checking the girl's vitals with quiet efficiency. "Has she woken up yet?" Ethan asked, his voice rough from lack of sleep. The nurse shook her head. "Not yet, but her readings are much better. Are you family?" The question hung in the air. "No," Ethan finally answered. "I'm the one who found her." "You stayed all night?" There was surprise in her voice and something else. Respect, perhaps. Before Ethan could respond, Amanda Diaz appeared at the doorway, looking marginally more rested than she had the previous night. "Mr. Reed, I didn't expect to find you still here." Ethan stood, stretching his cramped muscles. "I wanted to make sure she was okay." Ms. Diaz's expression was professionally neutral, but Ethan detected a hint of skepticism. She'd probably seen her share of Good Samaritans, whose interest faded with the dawn. "I've been making some calls," she said, gesturing for him to follow her into the hallway. "We have a temporary placement available at one of our emergency shelters. Once she's discharged, probably tomorrow or the day after, we can transfer her there while we search for any family." The word shelter sent an unexpected surge of protectiveness through Ethan. What kind of place is it? How many kids? What's the staff-to-child ratio? Ms. Diaz blinked, clearly surprised by his detailed questions. "It's a state-licensed facility. Mr. Reed, it meets all regulatory requirements." "That's not what I asked," Ethan pressed, falling naturally into his boardroom interrogation mode. "What's the environment like? Will she have personal attention? Who monitors her recovery?" "Mr. Reed," Ms. Diaz's tone grew firmer. "While I appreciate your concern, you need to understand that our resources are limited. The shelter is safe and adequately staffed, but it's temporary by design." Ethan ran a hand through his disheveled hair. He hadn't even looked in a mirror since yesterday, probably the longest he'd gone without checking his appearance since adolescence. "What if there was an alternative?" he asked. "Such as?" "What if I took her?" The words hung between them, as surprising to Ethan as they clearly were to Ms. Diaz, whose professional composure momentarily slipped. "You," she repeated. "Mr. Reed, with all due respect, temporary. Guardianship isn't something you just volunteer for on a whim. There are background checks, home inspections, interviews." "I understand," Ethan interrupted. "I'm willing to undergo whatever process is necessary. Expedited, of course." "Expedited," Ms. Diaz echoed flatly. "Mr. Reed, the foster system doesn't work on Wall Street time. These procedures exist to protect vulnerable children. And sending her to an overcrowded shelter protects her, Ethan countered. I have resources. I can provide one-on-one care, the best medical follow-up, a safe environment. Do you have any experience with children? The question stopped him short. No, he admitted, but I'm a quick learner. Ms. Diaz sighed. Mr. Reed, I appreciate your intentions, but... Please, Ethan interrupted, surprising himself with the emotion in his voice. At least tell me what would be required. I'm not asking for special treatment, just efficiency. Something in his tone must have reached her, because after a long moment, she nodded. I'll outline the process for you, but I want to be very clear. This is highly unusual, and I make no promises. That's all I'm asking, Ethan said, relief washing over him. What followed was a crash course in the bureaucracy of child welfare. Ethan listened intently as Ms. Diaz explained the requirements for emergency foster care. Background checks, financial disclosures, character references, home inspections, interviews with social workers and psychologists. Normally, the process took weeks, sometimes months. But Ethan Reed didn't become a billionaire by accepting normal timelines. As soon as Ms. Diaz left, he made a series of calls. To his lawyer, his head of security, his personal assistant, and finally to Jessica Chen, his chief of staff. I need you to clear my schedule for the next 72 hours, he told her. And I need you to personally come to Mount Sinai West. There's a situation. Jessica, who had worked with Ethan for 7 years and had seen him through countless corporate crises, mergers, and one particularly volatile IPO, recognized the tone in his voice. What kind of situation? She asked cautiously. The kind that requires absolute discretion and immediate action. I'll explain when you get here. To her credit, Jessica arrived within 40 minutes dressed in her usual impeccable corporate attire, carrying a garment bag with fresh clothes for Ethan. She listened without interruption as he explained the situation, her expression shifting from concern to disbelief and finally to a sort of resigned determination. So you want to become this child's emergency guardian, she summarized when he finished. Despite having no experience with children, no family support system, and in the middle of the Westlake acquisition negotiations. Yes, Ethan confirmed. Jessica studied him for a long moment. Why? It was a simple question, but Ethan found he had no simple answer. I don't know, he admitted. I just know I can't walk away. Jessica nodded, as if his non-answer was actually the most satisfactory response. Okay, what do you need me to do? With Jessica's organizational skills and Ethan's resources, the next 48 hours became a whirlwind of expedited processes. Ethan's legal team worked around the clock, filing emergency petitions and arranging for accelerated background checks. His security firm conducted a thorough assessment of his penthouse, implementing child safety measures with military precision. Jessica coordinated with interior designers to transform one of Ethan's guest rooms into a suitable space for a 4-year-old girl. Meanwhile, the child, still nameless, still unconscious, continued to improve. By the evening of the second day, the doctors were optimistic about her recovery, though concerned about her continued unconsciousness. Her body has been through severe trauma, Dr. Patel explained during her rounds. Sometimes remaining unconscious is the brain's way of facilitating healing. Ethan had barely left the hospital, working remotely from the child's room, taking calls in the hallway, reviewing documents on his tablet. Jessica had set up a makeshift office in a nearby waiting area, coordinating the logistics of his unprecedented request. On the morning of the third day, as Ethan was reviewing the preliminary home inspection report, a small sound drew his attention. To the bed. The girl's eyelids were fluttering. He moved closer, hardly daring to breathe. Her eyes opened, clear blue, startlingly bright against her pale face. She blinked several times, confusion evident as she took in the unfamiliar surroundings. When her gaze landed on Ethan, she shrank back slightly, fear replacing confusion. "Hey there," Ethan said softly, trying to keep his voice gentle. "You're okay. You're in a hospital. You were very cold, but the doctors helped you get better." The girl stared at him, her eyes wide and wary. "I'm Ethan," he continued, maintaining what he hoped was a reassuring smile. "I found you and brought you here. Can you tell me your name?" She remained silent, her small hands clutching the hospital blanket. A nurse entered, noticed the girl was awake, and immediately paged the doctor. Soon, the room was filled with medical staff checking vitals, asking questions, making notes. The girl endured their attention with silent stoicism, her eyes constantly returning to Ethan, as if he were the only constant in this strange new environment. When the medical team finally dispersed, Dr. Patel pulled Ethan aside. "She's remarkably resilient," she said, "but she's not speaking. This could be trauma-induced mutism or simply fear. Give her time." Time was something Ethan had never valued. Time was money, after all, and every second was quantifiable in his world. But as he returned to the girl's bedside, he found himself willing to give her all the time she needed. Miss Diaz arrived shortly after, accompanied by a child psychologist. They approached the girl with professional kindness, asking simple questions, showing her pictures, trying to establish some basic information. The girl remained silent, responding only with slight head movements, a nod, a shake, a tilt of uncertainty. "She understands English," the psychologist confirmed after their session. "She's cognitively present, just unwilling or unable to speak right now." "Did you learn anything?" Ethan asked. "She responded to the name Lily when we showed her a picture card with different names," Ms. Diaz said. "It might be her name, or something close enough that she recognized it." Lily. The name fit her somehow, delicate yet resilient. "Mr. Reed," Ms. Diaz continued, "I've reviewed your application and the preliminary reports. Your background check is clear, your financial stability is obviously not in question, and the initial home inspection found your residence suitable with the modifications you've implemented." Ethan straightened, hope rising. And I'm still not convinced this is the right placement for her," Ms. Diaz said frankly. "You have no experience with children, especially traumatized ones. Your work schedule is demanding. You have no family support system." "I've hired a full-time pediatric nurse," Ethan countered. "I've rearranged my schedule to work primarily from home for the next month. I've child-proofed my entire apartment and set up a room specifically designed for her needs." "On paper, you've addressed all the practical concerns," Ms. Diaz acknowledged. "But this isn't just about logistics, Mr. Reed. It's about emotional availability. This child needs more than physical care. She needs connection, stability, reassurance." "I understand that," Ethan said, frustration edging into his voice. "Do you?" Ms. Diaz challenged. "Because from where I stand, this looks like another project for you to manage, another problem to solve with money and efficiency." The accusations stung, partly because Ethan couldn't entirely deny it. He was approaching this the only way he knew how, with resources and determination, but something else was driving him, something he couldn't articulate even to himself. Before he could respond, a small sound interrupted them. They both turned to see Lily watching them intently from her bed, her expression troubled. "Sorry, sweetheart," Ms. Diaz said gently. "We didn't mean to argue." To everyone's surprise, Lily extended her hand toward Ethan, her small fingers opening and closing in a clear request. Ethan moved to her side, allowing her to grasp his index finger in her tiny fist. She held on with surprising strength, her eyes fixed on his face. "Well," Ms. Diaz said after a moment, something shifting in her expression, "that's interesting." Over the next day, as Lily's physical condition improved, she remained selectively mute but increasingly responsive to Ethan. She would watch him work on his laptop, her eyes following his movements around the room. When doctors or nurses entered, she would tense until Ethan reassured her with his presence. On the afternoon of her 4th day in the hospital, as Ethan was reading emails beside her bed, she reached over and touched his arm. When he looked up, she pointed to a cereal commercial, playing silently on the room's television. "Are you hungry?" Ethan asked. A small nod. "For cereal?" Another nod, more emphatic. It was such a normal, childlike request that Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. "I'll see what I can do," he promised. 20 minutes later, thanks to Jessica's efficiency, Ethan was awkwardly pouring colorful cereal into a hospital bowl while Lily watched with the first hint of excitement he'd seen on her face. As she carefully ate, spoon clutched in her small fist, milk occasionally dribbling down her chin, Ethan realized he was smiling, really smiling, not the practiced expression he wore for business associates or media photographers. When Ms. Diaz arrived for her daily check-in, she found them like this, Lily eating cereal, Ethan watching her with undisguised fascination. "Mr. Reed," Ms. Diaz said after observing them for a moment, "I'd like to schedule the final home inspection for tomorrow afternoon. If everything is in order, and pending the judge's approval of our emergency petition, Lily could potentially be released into your temporary custody by the end of the week." Ethan looked up, momentarily speechless. Then, collecting himself, he nodded. "Thank you, Ms. Diaz." "Don't thank me yet," she warned. "This is a provisional arrangement, subject to regular review. And there's still the matter of searching for any family members." "Of course," Ethan agreed quickly. "I understand." After she left, Ethan turned back to Lily, who was watching him with those solemn blue eyes, her cereal forgotten. Would you like to come stay with me for a while?" he asked gently. "I have a nice place with a room just for you." Lily didn't speak, but she reached out and took his hand again, her small fingers warm against his palm. It wasn't quite an answer, but somehow it felt like a promise. Ethan's penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a sleek glass tower in Tribeca, offering panoramic views of the Hudson River and the Manhattan skyline. It was a space designed to impress, minimalist furniture in neutral tones, original artwork on the walls, state-of-the-art technology hidden behind seamless surfaces. It was featured in Architectural Digest as the quintessential bachelor's domain, a description Ethan had always found amusingly accurate. Now, as he led Lily through the front door, he suddenly saw his home through new eyes. The glass coffee, table with sharp corners, the open staircase with its wide gaps between railings, the complete absence of anything soft, colorful, or child-friendly. Despite the whirlwind, preparations of the past week, the child-proofing, the hastily decorated bedroom, the stocked refrigerator, Ethan felt woefully unprepared. Jessica had done her best, working with interior designers to transform one of the guest rooms into a space suitable for a 4-year-old girl, but the result still felt staged, like a showroom rather than a real child's room. Lily stood in the entryway, still holding Ethan's hand, her eyes wide as she took in the expansive space. She wore new clothes, a simple blue dress and white cardigan that Jessica had purchased, along with a small suitcase of essentials. Her honey blonde hair had been washed and neatly combed, making her look like a different child from the one Ethan had found in the cardboard box. "This is where I live," Ethan said, feeling oddly nervous. "And now you'll be staying here too. Would you like to see your room?" Lily nodded, her expression serious as she followed him through the living area to a door painted a soft lavender, the only colorful door in the entire apartment. "Here we go," Ethan said, opening it with a flourish that felt awkward even to him. The room beyond was a valiant attempt at child-friendly luxury. A canopy bed with purple and white bedding dominated one wall, while a white bookshelf stocked with children's books lined another. A plush carpet covered the hardwood floors, and delicate fairy lights twinkled from the ceiling. A child-sized table and chairs sat in one corner, complete with art supplies and coloring books. Lily stepped inside cautiously, her eyes darting from one item to the next. Her expression remained unreadable as she slowly circled the room, touching the bedspread, examining a stuffed rabbit, opening and closing the closet door where new clothes hung in neat rows. "Do you like it?" Ethan asked, suddenly desperate for her approval. Lily turned to him, her blue eyes serious. Then, to his surprise, she nodded and offered a small, tentative smile, the first he'd seen from her. The simple gesture sent a wave of relief through Ethan. "Great," he said, returning her smile. "Are you hungry? We should probably have some lunch." In the kitchen, Ethan faced his next challenge. Despite owning a kitchen worthy of a professional chef, complete with a 6-burner Viking stove and dual Sub-Zero refrigerators, his culinary skills were limited to coffee and takeout orders. He opened the refrigerator, gratefully noting that Jessica had arranged for it to be stocked with child-appropriate foods. "How about a sandwich?" he suggested, spotting bread and what looked like sandwich fixings. Lily nodded, climbing onto one of the bar stools at the kitchen island. She watched with solemn attention as Ethan fumbled through the process of making what had to be the world's most awkward peanut butter and jelly sandwich. "I should warn you," he said, as he placed the slightly mangled creation in front of her. "I don't cook much, but we can order food from restaurants, or I can hire a chef, or I could learn, I suppose." He was rambling, he realized, nervous in a way he'd never been in front of the most intimidating corporate boards. Lily didn't seem to mind the imperfect sandwich. She ate carefully, taking small bites, occasionally glancing up at Ethan as if to make sure he was still there. The first day passed in a strange, quiet rhythm. Ethan showed Lily around the apartment, explained how the television worked, set up the tablet Jessica had loaded with children's apps and games. Lily followed him silently, taking everything in with those observant eyes, occasionally nodding or shaking her head in response to his questions, but never speaking. By evening, Ethan was exhausted in a way that board meetings and billion-dollar negotiations had never made him. The constant attention, the need to anticipate what Lily might need or want without verbal cues, the underlying worry that he was doing everything wrong, it was mentally draining. After a dinner of delivered pasta that Lily picked at cautiously, Ethan faced the next hurdle: bedtime. The pediatric nurse Jessica had hired was scheduled to start the following day, so tonight, Ethan was on his own. "I think it's time for bed," he said, checking his watch and seeing it was past 8. "Do you want to take a bath first?" Lily looked uncertain, but nodded. The ensuing bath time was a comedy of errors. Water on the floor, shampoo in eyes, resulting in the first tears Ethan had seen from her, and the realization that he had no idea how to detangle a child's wet hair without causing pain. By the time he had her dressed in new pajamas, her hair somewhat dry and marginally detangled, Ethan felt like he'd run a marathon. Lily, however, seemed more relaxed, her eyes heavy with sleepiness as he led her to her bedroom. "Would you like me to read you a story?" he asked, gesturing to the bookshelf. Lily nodded, selecting a book with a colorful cover and climbing into the canopy bed. Ethan sat beside her awkwardly at first, then with growing confidence as he began to read about a princess who didn't want to be rescued. Lily listened intently, her small body gradually relaxing against the pillows. By the time he finished the story, her eyes were closed, her breathing deep and even. Ethan sat there for a long moment, watching her sleep, struck by how vulnerable she looked and by the strange, protective feeling swelling in his chest. Carefully stood up, turned on the nightlight Jessica had thoughtfully provided, and left the room, leaving the door slightly ajar. In the silence of his living room, Ethan poured himself a glass of scotch and sank onto his sofa, suddenly aware of every aching muscle. His phone buzzed with notifications, emails, messages, missed calls from his executive team. The real world, demanding his attention. With a sigh, he picked up his phone and began to scroll through the messages. The Westlake acquisition was hitting roadblocks. The board was getting restless about his unplanned absence. The market was reacting to rumors of his temporary leave with predictable volatility. Ethan was halfway through composing a response to his CFO when a sound made him look up. Lily stood in the hallway, her face tear-streaked, her small body trembling. He was on his feet immediately, crossing to her in 3 long strides. "What's wrong? Did you have a bad dream?" Lily nodded, then did something unexpected. She raised her arms in the universal childhood gesture, asking to be picked up. Ethan hesitated only briefly before lifting her. She was so light, so fragile in his arms. She wrapped her arms around his neck, burying her face against his shoulder, her body still shaking with silent sobs. "It's okay," he murmured, awkwardly patting her back. "You're safe now. I won't let anything bad happen to you." He carried her to the sofa, sitting with her on his lap, continuing to murmur reassurances as her trembling gradually subsided. Eventually, she pulled back slightly, her teary eyes meeting his. "Was it a nightmare about before? About being in the cold?" Ethan asked gently. Lily nodded, then, to his astonishment, spoke her first words since he'd found her. "Mommy left," she whispered, her voice small and raspy from disuse. She said wait, but she didn't come back. The simple statement hit Ethan like a physical blow. "I'm so sorry, Lily," he said, his own voice rough with emotion. "That must have been very scary." She nodded again, her eyes solemn. "We slept in boxes before, but always together. Then she went to find food. She said, 'Stay in the box where it's warm.'" Her voice quavered. "I waited and waited." Ethan felt something twist in his chest. Anger at the mother who had abandoned this child, sorrow for Lily's suffering, and a fierce determination that he would never let her be abandoned again. "You don't have to sleep in boxes anymore," he promised. "And you don't have to wait alone. You have a real bed now, and I'll be here if you get scared." Lily studied his face, as if assessing the truth of his words. Then she laid her head against his chest, her small hand clutching a handful of his shirt. "Okay," she whispered. They sat like that for a long time until Lily's breathing deepened into sleep once more. Ethan didn't move, afraid of disturbing her, afraid of breaking this fragile trust she'd placed in him. His phone continued to buzz on the coffee table, the outside world clamoring for his attention. But for the first time in his adult life, Ethan Reed chose to ignore it. The next morning brought a flurry of activity. Jessica arrived early, accompanied by the pediatric nurse she'd hired, a calm, experienced woman named Maria, who immediately put Ethan at ease with her competent demeanor. She seemed to know instinctively how to approach Lily, kneeling to her eye level and speaking gently, but not condescendingly. "I'll be here during the day to help Mr. Reed take care of you," she explained to Lily. "Would that be okay with you?" Lily, who had reverted to silence in the presence of strangers, looked to Ethan for reassurance. When he nodded encouragingly, she offered a small nod of her own. "She spoke last night," Ethan told Jessica quietly, while Maria showed Lily how to use the special step stool they'd gotten for the bathroom sink. "She told me about her mother leaving her in the box to find food and not coming back." Jessica's expression softened with sympathy. "Poor little thing. The social worker is still trying to identify her or find any records of a missing child matching her description." Ethan nodded, distracted by the sight of Lily carefully washing, her hands under Maria's supervision, standing on tiptoe to reach the faucet. "I want to hire someone," he said abruptly, "a private investigator, someone discreet but thorough. We need to find out what happened to her." "Mother?" Jessica raised an eyebrow but nodded. "I'll make some calls. There's a firm we've used for corporate background checks that has a good reputation." "Tell them I want their best," Ethan said. "Money is no object." Later that morning, while Lily was occupied with Maria, Ethan retreated to his home office for a video conference with his executive team. They were professional, but couldn't quite hide their confusion at his uncharacteristic absence and distraction. The board. "Here's concerned, Ethan," his CFO, Michael Harrington, said bluntly. "This Westlake deal is time-sensitive. We need you fully engaged." "I am engaged," Ethan replied, even as his eyes drifted to the security feed on his second monitor, showing Lily and Maria in the living room, working on a puzzle. "I'm just handling things remotely for a while. There are rumors," his head of PR added delicately, "about your personal situation. If you're dealing with some kind of family emergency, we can craft a statement that—" "No statements," Ethan cut her off. "My personal life is private. Just reassure the board that I'm on top of the Westlake situation. I'll review the revised offer tonight and be on the investor call tomorrow." After the meeting, Ethan sat at his desk, staring at the security feed. Lily had finished the puzzle and was now drawing something, her small face intent with concentration. He found himself smiling at her serious expression, so at odds with her diminutive size. His phone rang. The private investigator Jessica had hired, a former FBI agent named David Mercer. Their conversation was brief and to the point. Mercer would begin investigating immediately, starting with the area where Ethan had found Lily and expanding from there. He would check hospital records, homeless shelters, police reports of missing persons, anything that might lead to information about Lily's mother. "This might take time," Mercer warned. "If the mother was homeless, she might not have left much of a paper trail. And if she abandoned the child deliberately, she might not want to be found." She didn't abandon her, Ethan found himself saying, remembering Lily's words. She went to find food and didn't come back. Something happened to her. There was a brief silence on the line. I'll keep that possibility in mind, Mercer said finally. I'll be in touch when I have something to report. After hanging up, Ethan sat for a moment, surprised by his own certainty. He had no reason to believe Lily's mother hadn't simply abandoned her. It happened every day in this city. Children left behind by parents who couldn't or wouldn't care for them. Yet, something in Lily's description, in her conviction that her mother would return, had convinced him otherwise. He was pulled from his thoughts by a soft knock at his office door. Maria stood there with Lily beside her. "Someone wanted to show you her drawing," Maria said with a smile. Lily approached his desk shyly, a piece of paper clutched in her small hands. She held it out to him with solemn ceremony. Ethan accepted, it feeling absurdly honored. The drawing was childish but clearly recognizable, a tall figure with brown hair holding hands with a small figure with yellow hair. Behind them was a box-like structure that might have been a house or might have been the cardboard box he'd found her in. The sky was a riot of colors, purple, pink, blue, and yellow, all swirled together. "Is this us?" Ethan asked, pointing. To the figures, Lily nodded, watching his face carefully. "It's beautiful," he said sincerely. "I love all the colors in the sky." A small smile flickered across her face, there and gone so quickly he might have imagined it, but the warmth in her eyes was unmistakable. "Can I keep it?" he asked. "I'd like to hang it here in my office." Lily nodded again, more emphatically this time. "Thank you," Ethan said, feeling ridiculously pleased. "This is the first artwork anyone has ever made just for me." As Maria led Lily back out, Ethan carefully pinned the drawing to his bulletin board, where it stood out in vibrant contrast to the financial reports and corporate memos surrounding it. He stared at it for a long moment, struck by how something so simple could feel so significant. His phone buzzed with another incoming email. More demands, more questions, more of the never-ending stream of business that had defined his life for so long. But for the first time, Ethan found himself reluctant to dive back in, his thoughts lingering instead on the small artist currently sitting in his living room and on the mystery of how she had come to be alone in that cardboard box on a freezing December night. 2 weeks passed in a blur of new routines and unexpected challenges. Ethan's life, once structured around market openings and board meetings, now revolved around a 4-year-old schedule. Breakfast at 7, educational activities, with Maria in the morning, lunch at noon, quiet time in the afternoon, dinner at 6, bath time at 7:30, bedtime stories at 8. Lily was slowly coming out of her shell. Though still quiet compared to other children her age, she now spoke regularly to Ethan and Maria, asking questions, expressing preferences, occasionally even laughing. A sound that never failed to stop Ethan in his tracks, no matter what he was doing. She was smart, he discovered, with an almost preternatural ability to observe and adapt. She learned the apartment's layout within days, figured out how to use the tablet without instruction, and memorized Ethan's work patterns with uncanny precision, appearing at his office door during his usual breaks as if she'd timed them. The temporary guardianship arrangement was proceeding smoothly. Ms. Diaz visited weekly, her initial skepticism gradually giving way to cautious approval as she observed the developing bond between Ethan and Lily. The pediatrician reported that Lily was gaining weight, her physical health improving steadily. On the business front, Ethan had found a new rhythm, working from home most days, scheduling video conferences around Lily's nap times, and going into the office only when absolutely necessary, always with the reassurance that Maria was with Lily and that he was just a phone call away. The board had adjusted to this new arrangement with varying degrees of acceptance. Some members respected his commitment to the child he'd rescued. Others saw it as an unnecessary distraction from the Westlake acquisition, which remained in a delicate negotiation phase. One rainy afternoon, as Ethan was reviewing financial projections in his home office, his phone rang with a call from David Mercer, the private investigator. "Mr. Reed," Mercer's voice was professionally neutral. "I have some developments to report." Ethan straightened in his chair. Go ahead. I've been working backward from where you found the child, Mercer explained, checking hospital admissions, police reports, shelter records, and I found something interesting. Ethan's heart rate quickened. What is it? On the same night you found the girl, a woman was brought to Bellevue Hospital unconscious. She was found collapsed on a sidewalk about 8 blocks from where you discovered the child. Severe hypothermia, malnutrition, generally poor health. No ID, no phone, nothing to identify her. Is she... Ethan couldn't bring himself to finish the question. She's alive, Mercer assured him. But she was in bad shape. After initial treatment at Bellevue, she was transferred to a recovery center in Queens. She's been there ever since, slowly regaining her strength. Has she said anything about a daughter? Ethan asked, his mind racing. That's the thing, Mercer continued. According to the social worker at the facility, as soon as she was coherent, she became frantic about finding her daughter. Said they'd been living on the streets together, that she'd left the girl in their safe place, a cardboard box near a specific building while she went to find food. She passed out before she could return. Ethan felt a chill run through him. It matched Lily's story exactly. The social worker helped her file a missing child report, but without knowing the child's full name or having any documentation, it's been difficult. They've been checking shelters and hospitals, but since the girl is in private care, she wouldn't show up in their searches, Ethan finished. What's the woman's name? Sarah Mitchell. She's 31. From what I've pieced together, she was a preschool teacher in Connecticut until about a year ago. Lost her job due to school budget cuts, then her apartment when she couldn't make rent. No family to speak of. Parents deceased, no siblings. She and her daughter have been homeless for approximately 3 months, moving between shelters when possible, sleeping rough when necessary. Ethan was silent, absorbing this information. A preschool teacher, a woman with education, with skills, reduced to living in cardboard boxes with her child. I'd like to see her, he said finally. Today, if possible. I thought you might, Mercer replied. I've already spoken to the facility director. They're expecting you this afternoon. After hanging up, Ethan sat motionless, his mind churning with implications. Lily's mother was alive. She hadn't abandoned her daughter. She'd been desperately trying to find her. How would Lily react to this news? How would the courts view his temporary guardianship now that the mother had been located? And beneath these practical concerns lay a deeper, more personal question. Why did the prospect of reuniting Lily with her mother fill him with such conflicting emotions? Joy for Lily, certainly, but also a hollow ache at the thought of losing her. He found Lily in the living room with Maria, building an elaborate structure with the wooden blocks he'd purchased last week. She looked up as he entered, her face brightening in the way that still surprised and moved him. Hey there, he said, kneeling beside her. That's quite a building you're making. It's a castle, Lily explained seriously, but with no doors that lock, so people can always come in if they need to. Something tightened in Ethan's chest. That's a very kind castle, he said. Lily, I need to talk to you about something important. Can you come sit with me for a minute? Sensing his serious tone, Lily carefully placed the block she was holding and followed him to the sofa. Maria discreetly moved to the kitchen, giving them privacy. Remember how I hired a special person to try to find your mom? Ethan began gently. Lily's eyes widened. Did he find her? The hope in her voice was painful to hear. Yes, Ethan said, managing a smile despite the lump in his throat. He did. She's been in a hospital getting better. She got very cold and hungry that night, just like you did, and some people found her and took her to get help. She didn't leave me on purpose? Lily's voice was small, vulnerable. No, sweetheart, she's been looking for you this whole time. She loves you very much and has been worried about you. Tears filled Lily's blue eyes. Can I see her? Yes, Ethan promised. Today, I'm going to take you to where she is right now. Lily launched herself at him, her small arms wrapping around his neck in a fierce hug. Thank you, she whispered. Thank you for finding my mommy. Ethan held her close, his own eyes stinging. You're welcome, Lily. Now why don't you go with Maria to get ready? We'll leave in an hour. As Maria helped Lily change into a clean dress and brush her hair, Ethan made the necessary arrangements, notifying Ms. Diaz of the development, having his driver prepare for the trip to Queens, and after a moment's consideration, asking Jessica to purchase a selection of practical gifts for Sarah Mitchell. Clothing, toiletries, a prepaid phone, items that would help ease her transition when she was discharged from the facility. The recovery center was a plain brick building in a quiet residential neighborhood, its institutional nature softened by well-tended gardens and cheerful curtains in the windows. Inside it was clean and modest, with none of the luxury Ethan associated with private medical facilities, but a palpable atmosphere of care and dignity. The director, Dr. Eleanor Phillips, greeted them personally, her manner warm but professional, as she shook Ethan's hand and knelt to introduce herself to Lily. "Your mother is very excited to see you," she told Lily gently. "She's been talking about you non-stop since we told her you were coming." "Is she still sick?" Lily asked anxiously. "She's much better," Dr. Phillips assured her. "Still a little weak, but getting stronger every day. Would you like to see her now?" Lily nodded, reaching for Ethan's hand. He gave her small fingers a reassuring squeeze as they followed Dr. Phillips down a corridor to a small, sunny room. The woman sitting in the armchair by the window bore little resemblance to the desperate homeless mother Ethan had imagined. Sarah Mitchell was thin, certainly, with shadows under her eyes speaking of recent illness, but there was a quiet dignity in her posture, a brightness in her green eyes that hinted at the person she had been before circumstances overwhelmed her. When she saw Lily, those eyes filled with tears. "Lily Bear," she whispered, opening her arms. Lily dropped Ethan's hand and ran to her mother, flinging herself into the embrace with a sob that seemed to contain all the fear and loneliness of the past weeks. "Mommy!" Ethan stood awkwardly in the doorway, feeling simultaneously essential to this reunion and utterly superfluous to it. This was Lily's mother, her real family. The woman who had cared for her before circumstances forced them onto the streets, who had apparently done everything possible to protect her daughter, even in the most desperate conditions. Sarah Mitchell held her daughter tightly, her eyes closed as tears streamed down her face. "I looked everywhere for you," she was saying. "I was so scared. I thought I'd lost you forever." "The nice man found me," Lily explained, pulling back to look at her mother's face. "In our box. I was so cold, but he took me to the doctor place and then to his house. He gave me my own room with purple blankets and books and toys." Sarah looked up then, seeming to truly notice Ethan for the first time. Her expression was a complex mixture of gratitude and wariness. "Mr. Reed," Dr. Phillips said, stepping into the silence. "This is Sarah Mitchell. Sarah, this is Ethan Reed, the man who found Lily and has been caring for her." Ethan moved forward, extending his hand. "Ms. Mitchell, I'm very glad we found you." Sarah took his hand briefly, her grip surprisingly firm despite her weakened state. "Thank you," she said, her voice rough with emotion, "for saving my daughter, for taking care of her when I couldn't." She paused, then added quietly, "for finding me." "I'm just glad it all worked out," Ethan replied, suddenly uncomfortable with her gratitude. He hadn't done any of this to be thanked. He'd done it because what? Because he couldn't walk away. Because something about that small, cold body in the cardboard box had awakened something in him he hadn't known existed. Dr. Phillips tactfully suggested that Ethan wait in the visitors' lounge while mother and daughter had some time alone to reconnect. He agreed, relieved to escape the emotional intensity of the room. In the lounge, he paced restlessly, checking his phone without really seeing the messages, his mind replaying the image of Lily in her mother's arms, where she belonged. It was what he'd wanted, what he'd worked toward these past weeks, so why did it feel like loss? An hour later, Dr. Phillips found him still pacing. "They're ready for you now," she said. "And Mr. Reed, I want to thank you personally for what you've done, not just for Lily, but for arranging the investigation. That found Sarah. Many people wouldn't have gone to such lengths." Ethan nodded, uncomfortable with the praise. It was the right thing to do. When he returned to Sarah's room, He found Lily sitting on her mother's lap, chattering animatedly about her experiences at his apartment. The view from the windows, the bubble baths, the breakfast cereal with marshmallows that Maria sometimes let her have as a special treat. Sarah listened with a smile, though Ethan could see the shadow of pain in her eyes at all she had missed. Sarah looked up as he entered. "Mr. Reed, Lily has been telling me about her adventures with you. It sounds like you've taken excellent care of her." "I had help," Ethan said, thinking of Maria's patience and Jessica's organizational skills. "And Lily made it easy. She's an amazing child." "She is," Sarah agreed, her arms tightening around her daughter. "Mr. Reed, I don't know how to thank you or how to repay you for everything you've done." "There's no need," Ethan assured her. "I'm just glad we found you. Dr. Phillips tells me you're recovering well. Do they have an estimate for when you might be discharged?" A shadow crossed Sarah's face. "Another week, they think. But—" She hesitated, clearly uncomfortable. "But—" Ethan prompted gently. "We don't have anywhere to go," she admitted, her voice quiet so Lily wouldn't hear the worry in it. "Our situation before was precarious. I lost my teaching job when the school district made cuts, couldn't find another position. We exhausted our savings, then stayed with friends until we'd worn out our welcome. The shelters were often full, especially the ones safe for children." She took a deep breath. "I've been applying for jobs from here. The social worker has been helping me. But without an address, without professional clothes for interviews," she shook her head. "I'm sorry. This isn't your problem." But it was his problem, Ethan realized. It had become his problem the moment he picked up Lily from that cardboard box. And contrary to what he might have expected a month ago, he didn't resent it. He welcomed it. "I might have a solution," he said slowly. "If you'd be willing to consider—" Sarah looked at him cautiously. "What kind of solution?" "I own several properties in the city. One of them is a small apartment in a good neighborhood, close to parks, excellent school district. It's currently vacant. I'd be happy to lease it to you at a nominal rate until you get back on your feet." Sarah's expression shifted from hope to wariness. "That's incredibly generous, Mr. Reed, but I couldn't accept charity of that magnitude." "It's not charity," Ethan insisted. "Consider it an investment. You're a trained educator. Once you're re-established, you'll be contributing to society again, paying taxes, perhaps even teaching children who will go on to do important things." It was the kind of argument that had worked on reluctant investors. He hoped it would work. On a proud mother. Sarah studied him for a long moment, her green eyes sharp despite her weakened state. "You've grown attached to my daughter," she said finally. It wasn't a question. Ethan didn't deny it. "Yes," he admitted, "I have." "And this offer, is it contingent on continued access to Lily?" The question stung, but Ethan understood its necessity. "No," he said firmly. "The apartment is yours regardless, as is any other assistance I can provide in helping you rebuild your life. My only request would be that, if you're comfortable with it, I could visit Lily occasionally. I'd understand completely if you'd prefer a clean break." The thought of never seeing Lily again made something twist painfully in his chest, but he kept his expression neutral. This wasn't about him or his feelings. It was about what was best for Lily and her mother. Sarah's eyes softened. "Mr. Reed, you saved my daughter's life. You cared for her when I couldn't. I would never keep her from someone who clearly loves her." She paused, glancing down at Lily, who was now playing contentedly with a doll Jessica had thought to bring. "And from what Lily tells me, I think she would miss you too." Relief washed over Ethan. "Thank you," he said simply. "But," Sarah continued, her voice firmer now, "I need you to understand something. I am Lily's mother. I made terrible mistakes, trusted the wrong people, made poor financial decisions, waited too long to ask for help. But I have never stopped loving her or trying to protect her. Now that I have a second chance, I intend to be the mother she deserves." "I never doubted that," Ethan assured her. "Everything Lily has told me about you, every reaction she's had to finding you again, it's clear you're an excellent mother who faced impossible circumstances. Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly. Then we understand each other. She hesitated, then added, and I would be grateful for the apartment as a lease, not a gift. I'll pay you back once I'm employed again. We can work out the details later, Ethan said, relieved that she had accepted. For now, focus on getting your strength back. I'll have everything ready by the time you're discharged. As they prepared to leave, Lily became agitated, clinging to her mother while looking anxiously at Ethan. Are you both coming to the new house? She asked, confusion evident in her small face. Sarah knelt to her level. No, sweetheart, Mr. Reed has his own home. You and I will live together in the new apartment he's helping us find. But I'll still see Ethan, right? Lily's voice wobbled dangerously. Of course, Sarah assured her with a glance at Ethan. He can visit us, and maybe sometimes you can visit him, if that's okay with him. Absolutely, Ethan confirmed, crouching down to meet Lily's eyes. This isn't goodbye, Lily. It's just a new chapter. Lily considered this seriously, then nodded. Like in my bedtime stories, when they turn the page and there's new adventures. Exactly like that, Ethan agreed, his throat tight. And you get to have adventures with your mom now, which is even better. Lily stepped forward and wrapped her arms around his neck in one of her fierce hugs. Thank you for finding my mommy, she whispered. Over Lily's shoulder, Ethan met Sarah's gaze. Her eyes were damp, but there was strength there and determination, and the unmistakable fierce love of a mother for her child. In that moment, Ethan knew he'd made the right decision. No matter what it cost him personally, this was what Lily needed. Her mother, a stable home, a chance at a normal childhood, and somehow he would find a way to remain part of her life, even if in a much different role than he'd begun to imagine for himself. The Brooklyn Heights apartment was perfect, a 2-bedroom unit in a well-maintained brownstone with high ceilings, hardwood floors, and large windows that filled the space with natural light. It was modest by Ethan's standards, but represented unimaginable luxury to Sarah and Lily after months of homelessness. Ethan had given Jessica carte blanche to prepare the space, and she had outdone herself. The furniture was simple but high quality, the decor warm and inviting without being overly precious. Lily's room featured a bed similar to the one in Ethan's penthouse, with the same purple canopy she had loved, while the master bedroom was outfitted with a comfortable queen bed and practical storage solutions. The kitchen was fully stocked with appliances, dishes, and basic pantry items. The bathroom contained new towels, toiletries, and child-friendly bath products. In the living room, bookshelves held a selection of children's books and educational materials, a thoughtful touch that brought tears to Sarah's eyes when she first toured the apartment. "This is too much," she had whispered, running her hand along the spine of a book on early childhood education. "It's exactly right," Ethan had countered gently. "You're a teacher. You'll need resources." The day Sarah was discharged from the recovery center, Ethan arranged for his driver to bring her and Lily directly to the apartment. He had intentionally made himself scarce for their arrival, wanting to give them space to settle in without feeling observed or indebted. But he'd left a simple note on the kitchen counter, along with information about the neighborhood, grocery stores, parks, the local library, the elementary school where Lily would eventually enroll. The next week was strange for Ethan. His apartment, so recently filled with Lily's presence, felt echoing and empty. He found himself listening for her footsteps, expecting her to appear in doorways, missing the sound of her voice asking endless questions. Maria had been reassigned to another family. Jessica had returned to focusing primarily on his business affairs, and Ethan had resumed his regular office schedule, yet nothing felt regular anymore. He called once 3 days after Sarah and Lily moved in, just to check that everything was functioning properly in the apartment. Sarah was polite but reserved, thanking him again for his generosity while maintaining a careful distance. Lily came on the phone briefly, chattering about her new room and the park they had visited, before being called away for dinner. A week stretched into 2. Ethan threw himself into work, staying late at the office, pursuing the Westlake acquisition with renewed vigor. The board noticed the change, approving of his renewed focus, unaware of the emptiness that drove it. It was Jessica who finally confronted him, closing his office door one evening when everyone else had gone home. "You miss her," she said simply, perching on the edge of his desk. Ethan didn't pretend to misunderstand. She's where she belongs. That's not what I asked. Ethan sighed, leaning back in his chair. Yes, I miss her, more than I expected to. It's ridiculous. She was only with me for a few weeks. It's not ridiculous, Jessica countered. You saved her life. You cared for her. You formed a bond. That matters. She has her mother now, that's what matters. Jessica studied him for a moment. You know, when you first told me about finding Lily, I thought it was just another Ethan. Read crusade. Identify problem, throw resources at it, solve it, move on. I never expected you to get personally involved, let alone emotionally attached. Neither did I, Ethan admitted. But something changed, didn't it? Something about her. Changed you? Ethan considered this. Had he changed? He still ran the same company, lived in the same apartment, pursued the same business goals. Yet something fundamental had shifted in his perception of what mattered, what constituted success or failure, what gave life meaning. Maybe, he conceded. But it doesn't change the reality. Lily belongs with her mother, end of story. Jessica shook her head. That's not the end of the story, Ethan. It's barely the middle. She stood, straightening her skirt. Call them. Invite them for dinner or offer to take them out. Stop being a martyr. It doesn't suit you. With that, she left, closing the door behind her with a definitive click. Ethan sat in silence for a long time, Jessica's words echoing in his mind. Finally, he picked up his phone and composed a text message to Sarah. Casual, non-intrusive, offering to take them to dinner that weekend if they were free. He stared at it for 10 minutes before hitting send, then immediately regretted it, certain he was overstepping. To his surprise, Sarah responded almost immediately, accepting the invitation and suggesting a child-friendly restaurant near their apartment. The relief Ethan felt was disproportionate to the simple social acceptance, but he didn't examine it too closely. Saturday evening found him more nervous than he'd been before billion-dollar negotiations. He changed his shirt twice, debated whether a gift would be appropriate, and finally settled on bringing a small stuffed elephant for Lily, a companion for the rabbit that had been in her room at his apartment. The restaurant Sarah had suggested was a cozy Italian place with red checkered tablecloths and crayon drawings on the walls. It was miles away from the Michelin-starred establishments Ethan typically frequented, but the moment he walked in and spotted Lily's beaming face at a corner table, he knew it was perfect. "Ethan!" she called out, waving enthusiastically. "Several." Nearby diners smiled at her excitement. Sarah rose as he approached, her greeting more reserved but genuine. She looked better than she had at the recovery center, still thin, but with healthy color in her cheeks and a quiet confidence in her posture. She wore simple jeans and a blue sweater that brought out the green in her eyes, her light brown hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. "Mr. Reed," she said, extending her hand. "Thank you for the invitation." "Ethan, please," he insisted, shaking her hand before turning to Lily, who was practically bouncing in her seat. "And hello to you, Miss Lily. I brought you something." He handed her the small wrapped package. Lily tore into it with typical 4-year-old enthusiasm, squealing with delight at the stuffed elephant. "Look, Mommy, now Bunny has a friend." "What? Do you say to Ethan?" Sarah prompted gently. "Thank you," Lily beamed, then patted the chair beside her. "Sit here next to me. I can show you my drawings." Dinner was surprisingly comfortable. Lily dominated the conversation, filling Ethan in on every detail of their new life, the park with the good swings, the library story time they'd attended, the neighbor's cat that sometimes sat in their window. Sarah interjected occasionally, her initial reserve gradually warming as the meal progressed. Over dessert, ice cream for Lily, espresso for the adults, Sarah brought up her job search. "I have an interview next week," she said, "at a preschool in Park Slope. It's only part-time to start, but it could lead to more hours." "That's excellent," Ethan said sincerely. "Teaching is your passion, isn't it?" Sarah nodded, a spark lighting her eyes. "I've always loved working with young children, watching them discover the world, helping shape their early experiences. There's nothing like it." She hesitated, then added more softly, I missed it during our difficult time, missed feeling useful, contributing something meaningful. You'll be amazing, Ethan assured her. Any school would be lucky to have you. A faint blush colored Sarah's cheeks. Thank you, that means a lot. As they were preparing to leave, Lily looked up at Ethan with serious eyes. Are you coming to visit our house soon? I want to show you my room. It's almost the same as at your house, but I put my drawings on the wall. Ethan glanced at Sarah, not wanting to presume. That would be up to your mum. Sarah hesitated only briefly. You're welcome to come by sometime, maybe for coffee next weekend. The invitation was cautious but sincere. Ethan accepted with what he hoped was equal casualness, though the prospect of seeing where Lily now lived, of being welcomed into their space, filled him with a warmth he hadn't expected. The following week brought an unwelcome complication. Victor Sutton, CEO of Meridian Investments, and Ethan's longtime business rival requested a meeting. This was unusual. They typically interacted only at industry events or through intermediaries during particularly competitive deals. Victor's reputation for ruthless business tactics was well earned, and Ethan had always maintained a careful professional distance. The meeting was brief and ostensibly cordial. Victor wanted to discuss potential collaboration on a new financial technology platform, a reasonable business proposition on the surface. But as the conversation progressed, Ethan sensed an undercurrent of something else. I heard an interesting rumor recently, Victor said casually as they were wrapping up. Something about you taking in a homeless child. Very humanitarian of you. Ethan kept his expression neutral. I don't discuss my personal life. Of course, Victor smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. It's just surprising. Ethan Reed, the ruthless wunderkind of algorithmic trading, playing guardian angel to the downtrodden, makes for quite a story. Is there a business purpose to this line of conversation? Ethan asked coolly. Victor leaned back, studying him. Just making conversation, but it does make one wonder, what would your investors think? The man entrusted with billions of their dollars suddenly developing a soft spot. It might raise questions about your focus, your priorities, especially with the Westlake deal still hanging in the balance. The implied threat was clear. Ethan ended the meeting shortly thereafter, his mind racing. How had Victor learned about Lily? What was his angle? And more importantly, what was he planning to do with the information? Jessica confirmed his fears the next morning. There's chatter, she said grimly, placing a tablet on his desk. Social media, financial blogs, even a few mainstream business publications asking questions. Ethan scanned the headlines with growing concern. Tech billionaire's secret charity. Case, PR stunt or genuine altruism? Reed's focus questioned as personal project takes center stage. Quantum capital investors concerned about CEO's distraction. Sources close to the situation suggest Reed has been housing a homeless child, possibly to rehabilitate his image following criticism of Quantum's aggressive market practices. The implication was clear and damaging, that Ethan was using Lily as a publicity stunt, a calculated move to soften his cutthroat image while distracting from questionable business practices. This has Victor written all over it, Ethan said, pushing the tablet away in disgust. He's trying to destabilize investor confidence ahead of the Westlake deal. The board is already calling, Jessica confirmed. They want an emergency meeting this afternoon. The board meeting was as difficult as Ethan had anticipated. Several members expressed concern about the media attention, questioning whether his personal project was affecting his business judgment. Others were more blunt, suggesting that his involvement with Lily and her mother represented a liability to the company's reputation. Robert Harrison, the oldest and most conservative board member, was particularly harsh. You've worked years to build Quantum's reputation as a forward-thinking, unsentimental financial powerhouse, he said, his voice dripping with disapproval. Now you're risking it all for what? Some misplaced sense of heroism? A child you found on the street? Ethan felt his temper rising but kept his voice level. My personal life has no bearing on my capacity to run this company. The Westlake acquisition is proceeding on schedule. Our quarterly projections are being met or exceeded. There is no actual problem here. The problem, Harrison countered, is perception. Investors don't like uncertainty. They don't like sentimentality. And they certainly don't like their CEO being portrayed as either distracted or manipulative in the press. So, what exactly are you suggesting? Ethan asked, though he already knew the answer. Harrison exchanged glances with several other board members before responding. We think it would be best if you distanced yourself from this situation. The child is back with her mother now, correct? Your obligation is fulfilled. Make a clean break, issue a statement emphasizing your focus on Quantum's core business, and move on. And if I don't? The room fell silent. Finally, Harrison spoke again, his tone regretful but firm. Then we would need to reassess your position as CEO. The Westlake deal is too important to risk. Ethan looked around the table, noting who met his eyes and who didn't. He had built this company from nothing, had hand-picked most of these board members. Now they were giving him an ultimatum: abandon Lily and Sarah or risk losing everything he'd worked for. I'll take your concerns under advisement, he said finally, standing to signal the end of the meeting. Now, if there's no other business, I have a conference call with the Westlake team in 15 minutes. As the board members filed out, Jessica remained behind, her expression troubled. They're serious, Ethan. Harrison has been calling major shareholders, testing the waters for a vote of no confidence. Let him try, Ethan said grimly. I still control 40% of the voting shares. It's not just the board, Jessica warned. Victor Sutton is behind this media campaign and he's good at what he does. If he can create enough doubt among investors, even your share position won't matter. The stock will tank, the Westlake deal will collapse, and the board will have all the justification they need. Ethan ran a hand through his hair, the magnitude of the situation hitting him. So my options are abandon Lily and Sarah to save my company, or risk losing everything I've built over the past decade. I'm afraid so, Jessica said quietly. I'm sorry, Ethan. I know how much they've come to mean to you. Ethan stared out the window at the Manhattan skyline, the empire of glass and steel that represented his life's work. Then he thought of Lily's face lighting up when she saw him at the restaurant, of Sarah's cautious invitation to visit their home of the small family they were rebuilding with his help. Set up a press conference, he said finally. Tomorrow morning. I'll handle this my way. The next day, as he was preparing for the press conference, Ethan received an unexpected call from Sarah. I saw the news, she said without preamble. About you, about us. They're saying horrible things. That you used Lily as a publicity stunt. That you're housing us to distract from some corporate scandal. Her voice was tight with distress. Ethan, I'm so sorry. This is our fault. No, Ethan said firmly. This is not your fault. It's business politics, nothing more. My rival saw an opportunity to destabilize me and took it. But they're using... Lily, Sarah said, her voice cracking. Someone was taking pictures of us at the park yesterday, my daughter, after everything she's been through. I'll handle it, Ethan promised. Trust me, Sarah. I won't let them hurt either of you. After hanging up, Ethan sat at his desk, a cold anger building inside him. Victor and the board had miscalculated badly. They thought his connection to Lily was a weakness they could exploit. They were about to discover just how wrong they were. The press conference was scheduled for 9 o'clock in Quantum Capital's sleek conference center. Journalists from major financial publications and networks filled the room, drawn by rumors of a significant announcement from the notoriously private CEO. The board members sat in the front row, Harrison's smug expression suggesting he expected Ethan to capitulate to their demands. Ethan had spent the night reviewing his options, consulting with his legal team, and reaching a decision that felt both terrifying and absolutely right. As he approached the podium, he felt a strange calm settle over him. Good morning, he began, looking directly into the cameras. I've called this press conference to address certain rumors and speculation that have appeared in the media recently. Rather than allow mischaracterizations to persist, I want to speak directly and honestly. He paused, scanning the audience. Victor Sutton had managed to secure a seat in the back row, his expression carefully neutral, but his eyes watchful. Ethan continued, his voice steady. 3 weeks ago, I encountered a 4-year-old girl abandoned in a cardboard box on a freezing December night. I took her to the hospital, where doctors determined she was suffering from hypothermia and malnutrition. When I learned she would be placed in an emergency shelter, I applied for temporary guardianship. Murmurs rippled through the audience. Ethan pressed on. Subsequently, through private investigation, we located the child's mother, who had not abandoned her daughter but had collapsed from exposure and hunger while seeking food. She had been hospitalized and then transferred to a recovery facility, frantically searching for her daughter the entire time. Since her recovery, I have assisted the mother and child in establishing a stable living situation. I have done this privately, without publicity, without press releases or photo opportunities. He leaned forward slightly, his gaze intensifying. Now, certain parties, and I think we all know who they are, have suggested that my involvement with this child and her mother represents either a distraction from my duties as CEO or, more insidiously, a calculated public relations move to soften my image during sensitive business negotiations. Harrison shifted uncomfortably in his seat. Victor's expression remained impassive. Let me be absolutely clear, Ethan continued. My commitment to Quantum Capital and our investors remains unwavering. The Westlake acquisition is proceeding on schedule. Our quarterly projections are not just being met, but exceeded. There is no conflict between my personal choices and my professional responsibilities. As for the suggestion that this was some kind of PR stunt, Ethan allowed himself a cold smile. If that were true, you would have heard about it weeks ago directly from our marketing department, complete with professional photographs and a heartwarming narrative. I would not have gone to considerable lengths to keep it private. The truth is much simpler and perhaps harder for some to understand. I helped a child in need because it was the right thing to do. I continue to help her and her mother for the same reason, and I will not be bullied, threatened, or manipulated into abandoning them now because it makes certain people uncomfortable or challenges their perception of how a CEO should behave. The room had gone completely silent. Harrison's face had reddened. Victor's remained carefully blank. Now to address the concerns of our board and shareholders directly, Ethan said, his tone shifting to the precise, clinical one he used for financial presentations. I have prepared a comprehensive report demonstrating Quantum's performance over the past quarter, including the period of my temporary guardianship. As you will see from the data, our metrics have not only remained stable, but improved in several key areas. Jessica stepped forward, distributing tablets to the board members and key journalists. Ethan waited as they began to scan the information. Additionally, he continued, I am announcing today the formation of the Quantum Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to supporting families in crisis, particularly single parents and children facing homelessness. The foundation will focus on providing temporary housing, job placement assistance, and educational opportunities. This was the pivot, the move Jessica had suggested when he'd called her late last night. Transform the perceived weakness into high strength, the personal choice into a corporate initiative. Quantum Capital will provide initial funding of $50 million with an additional commitment of $15 million annually for the next 5 years. I will personally match these contributions and serve as chairman of the foundation's board. Harrison's expression had shifted from anger to calculation. Several other board members were nodding thoughtfully. Even in their worst light, they were business people who recognized a potential advantage when they saw one. This initiative not only aligns with my personal values, but represents sound corporate citizenship that will enhance Quantum's brand and create lasting positive impact in communities where we operate. It is not a distraction from our core business, but an extension of our commitment to innovation and excellence in all areas. Ethan paused, allowing the information to sink in before delivering his final point. To those who see compassion as weakness, who believe human connection is incompatible with business success, I offer this challenge. Prove it. Show me the data that indicates empathy diminishes performance. Demonstrate empirically that caring about others reduces shareholder value. He straightened, his voice gaining intensity. Because what I've learned, What this experience has taught me is precisely the opposite. Understanding the real human impact of our decisions, recognizing our responsibility to the communities we serve, doesn't compromise our business acumen. It enhances it. It makes us better investors, better leaders, and ultimately, better human beings. The press conference erupted into questions, but Ethan had said what he needed to say. He nodded to Jessica, who stepped forward to moderate and made his way off the stage. As he passed the front row, he caught Harrison's eye. The older man gave him a grudging nod of acknowledgement, not approval certainly, but recognition of a strategic move well played. Victor Sutton was already slipping out a side door, his failed gambit apparent to everyone in the room. By afternoon, the narrative had shifted dramatically. Financial analysts were praising Quantum's innovative approach to corporate social responsibility. Human interest pieces were appearing about the billionaire with a heart who rescued a child from the streets. The board, sensing the changing winds, issued a unanimous statement of support for both Ethan's leadership and the new foundation initiative. When Ethan finally returned to his penthouse that evening, exhausted but satisfied, he found an unexpected visitor waiting in his lobby. Sarah Mitchell stood by the concierge desk, looking uncomfortable but determined. "Ms. Mitchell," Ethan said, surprised, "is everything all right? Where's Lily?" "With my neighbor," Sarah explained. "She's a retired teacher who's been helping us out. Lily's fine." She hesitated. "I saw your press conference, or parts of it, online." Ethan nodded, uncertain where this was heading. "Would you like to come up? We can talk more comfortably." In his apartment, Sarah declined his offer of a drink, pacing the living room instead, her expression troubled. "You didn't have to do that," she said finally. "Put yourself out there. Risk your reputation, your company. Not for us." "I didn't. Do it just for you," Ethan admitted. "I did it because they were wrong, the board, Victor, all of them. Wrong about what matters, about how business should work, about the kind of person I want to be." Sarah studied him, her green eyes intent. "The foundation, is that real, or just a PR move to counter the negative press?" "It's real," Ethan assured her. "The paperwork was already being processed before today. Finding you and Lily, it opened my eyes to problems I'd been too insulated to see. Too many families are one crisis away from the streets. Too many children sleeping in cardboard boxes. In one of the wealthiest cities in the world. I can't fix it all, but I can make a difference." Sarah's expression softened. "Lily keeps asking when you're coming to visit. She has all these things she wants to show you. Her drawings, the way she arranged her stuffed animals, the view from her window." She paused. "I've been cautious, keeping some distance. After everything we've been through, I needed to establish boundaries to be sure of my footing as her mother." "I understand," Ethan said. "Your priority has to be Lily. It should be." "Yes," Sarah agreed, "but I'm realizing that what's best for Lily might include keeping you in her life." She smiled slightly. "She misses you, and I think you miss her too." "I do," Ethan admitted. "More than I expected. The interview I mentioned, at the preschool, they offered me the position. I start next week, part-time to begin with, but the director hinted it could become full-time by spring." "That's wonderful," Ethan said sincerely. "Congratulations." "Thank you." Sarah took a deep breath. "I've been thinking about your foundation. You'll need someone with experience in early childhood education, someone who understands what families in crisis need. If you're serious about making a difference." Ethan caught her meaning immediately. "Are you offering your professional expertise, Ms. Mitchell?" "Jasira," she corrected with a small smile. "And yes, I am. Not full-time, I want to keep teaching, but as a consultant perhaps, someone who's been on both sides of the equation." "I think that's an excellent idea," Ethan said, genuinely pleased by the suggestion. "We need exactly that kind of perspective." They spent the next hour discussing possibilities, programs the foundation could implement, partnerships with existing organizations, ways to address the systemic issues that led to family homelessness. Sarah's insights were invaluable, her first-hand experience lending weight and practicality to the theoretical models Ethan had been considering. As she prepared to leave, Sarah hesitated at the door. "Sunday dinner," she said abruptly. "At our place." "Nothing. Fancy. I'm still learning my way around that kitchen, but if you're free—" "I'd like that," Ethan said, surprised and touched by the invitation. Sarah nodded, suddenly shy. 6 o'clock. Lily will be thrilled. After she left, Ethan stood at his window, looking out at the city lights. The board meeting, the press conference, the launch of the foundation, it had been one of the most consequential days of his professional life. Yet what lingered in his mind was not the corporate maneuvering or the strategic victory over Victor Sutton, but the simple invitation to Sunday dinner with Sarah and Lily. The following days brought a flurry of activity. The Quantum Foundation officially launched, with a high-profile event attended by city officials, business leaders and social service providers. Jessica oversaw the hiring of an executive director and key staff, while Ethan focused on establishing the foundation's mission and strategic priorities. Meanwhile, the Westlake acquisition moved forward smoothly, the temporary uncertainty forgotten, as investors responded positively to Quantum's strong quarterly results and innovative new initiative. Even Harrison had grudgingly acknowledged that the foundation was generating positive press and strengthening the company's position in negotiations. Through it all, Ethan found himself counting down to Sunday evening. He purchased a carefully selected bottle of wine for Sarah and a set of professional quality colored pencils for Lily, remembering how much she enjoyed drawing. As 6 o'clock approached, he felt an anticipation he hadn't experienced since childhood Christmases. The Brooklyn Heights apartment looked different from when he'd first seen it, lived in now, with Lily's artwork adorning the refrigerator, books and magazines on the coffee table, a vase of fresh flowers on the dining table. Sarah greeted him at the door, wiping her hands on an apron, her hair pulled back in a casual ponytail. "Fair warning," she said with a smile, "I'm attempting lasagna for the first time. Results not guaranteed." Before Ethan could respond, a small tornado in a purple dress barreled down the hallway. "Ethan!" Lily cried, launching herself at him with the unrestrained enthusiasm only a 4-year-old could muster. He caught her in mid-leap, lifting her high as she giggled in delight. "Hello, Miss Lily, I've missed you." "I missed you too," she declared. "Come see my room, I decorated it all by myself. Well, Mommy helped with the high parts, but I decided where everything goes." Over Lily's head, Ethan met Sarah's gaze. She smiled, giving a small nod of permission. "Dinner's still got 20 minutes in the oven, go ahead. The grand tour is mandatory, I'm afraid." Lily's room was a delightful chaos of creativity, drawings taped to walls, stuffed animals arranged, in complex social groupings on the bed, books stacked according to some organizational system only she understood. She proudly showed him each element, explaining the backstory of every drawing, the name and personality of every stuffed creature. "And this is where I can see the park," she concluded, pointing out her window to the green space visible a block away. "Mommy takes me there every day after school. I'm going to real school soon, did you know, when I'm 5. That's just one more birthday." "That's wonderful," Ethan said, genuinely impressed by her excitement about education. "You're going to love school." Lily nodded seriously. "Mommy says I'm already very good at learning things. She's a teacher, you know. She teaches little kids like me, but not me, other ones." "I heard about her new job," Ethan confirmed. "She's going to be an amazing teacher." "The best one," Lily agreed confidently. Then, her expression turning more solemn, she added, "Ethan, are you still my friend even though I don't live at your house anymore?" The question caught him off guard with its directness. "Of course I am," he assured her. "Friends don't have to live together to care about each other." Lily considered this, then nodded, satisfied. "Good, because I told all the kids at the park about you, how you found me in the box and took me to your castle in the sky." "Castle in the sky?" Ethan repeated, amused. "That's what she calls—" "Your penthouse," Sarah's voice came from the doorway. "Apparently it's where the prince lives." Her tone was teasing, but there was warmth in her eyes as she looked at them. "Dinner's ready if the royal tour is complete." The lasagna was slightly overdone at the edges, but delicious nonetheless. They ate at the small dining table, Lily chattering continuously about her adventures at the park, her new friends, the library book Sarah had read to her. It was simple, domestic, utterly different from the business dinners that usually filled Ethan's evenings, and somehow more satisfying than any meal he could remember. After dinner, while Sarah put Lily to bed, a process that involved multiple stories, several trips for water, and negotiations about which stuffed animals could sleep on the bed, Ethan washed the dishes, finding unexpected satisfaction in the mundane task. When Sarah returned to the living room, she found him examining the bookshelves, which contained a mix of children's books and more adult selections, novels, memoirs, and several volumes on early childhood education. "She went down easily tonight," Sarah said, accepting the glass of wine he offered. "Usually it's a much longer production. I think you wore her out with all that attention." "She's amazing," Ethan said simply. "You've done an incredible job with her, especially considering what you've both been through." Sarah's expression softened. "She makes it easy. She's so resilient, so quick to find joy in small things." She hesitated. "The foundation work is going well." "Very well," Ethan confirmed. "Your input has been invaluable. The housing specialist we hired is already implementing several of your suggestions about family-friendly accommodations." They talked for a while about the foundation's progress, about Sarah's preparations for her new teaching position, about Lily's development and needs. It was comfortable, collaborative. Two adults united in their concern for a child's welfare, but also enjoying each other's perspective and company. As the evening drew to a close, Ethan found himself reluctant to leave. This small, warm apartment with its crayon drawings and slightly scorched lasagna had come to feel more like home than his sleek penthouse ever had. "Thank you for dinner," he said, as Sarah walked him to the door, "and for the invitation. It meant a lot." Sarah studied him for a moment, her expression thoughtful. When I first met you, I thought you were just another rich guy with a savior complex, swooping in to rescue the poor homeless family, feeling good about your generosity before moving on to the next project." "And now?" Ethan asked, genuinely curious. "Now I think you're someone who found something he didn't know he was looking for," she said simply. "Someone who discovered that helping others isn't just about what you give, but what you receive in return." Ethan considered this. "You might be right," he admitted. "I've spent my entire adult life accumulating wealth, power, influence. But these past weeks with Lily, and now with the foundation, I felt something different, something more substantial." "Purpose," Sarah suggested. "The difference between success and significance." "Yes," Ethan agreed, surprised by her insight. "Exactly that." Sarah smiled, a gentle expression that transformed her face. "Same time next week, Lily will be disappointed if her prince doesn't return to the kingdom regularly." "I'd like that." "Very much," Ethan said, suddenly feeling lighter than he had in months. Spring arrived in New York with a burst of green in the parks and a sense of renewal in the air. 4 months had passed since Ethan found Lily in that cardboard box. 4 months that had transformed his life in ways he could never have anticipated. The Quantum Foundation had quickly established itself as a serious player in addressing family homelessness. With Sarah's guidance, they had developed innovative programs that went beyond temporary shelter to address the root causes of housing insecurity, job training, childcare assistance, mental health services, and financial literacy education. Their first major project, the renovation of an abandoned apartment building in Brooklyn into transitional housing for families, was nearing completion. The building, which they had named Castle Without Doors at Lily's suggestion, would provide safe, dignified accommodations for 12 families at a time, along with on-site support services and a children's play area designed with input from early childhood development experts. Sarah had become an essential part of the Foundation's work, serving as a consultant while maintaining her teaching position at the preschool. Her first-hand experience of homelessness, combined with her professional background in education, brought credibility and practical wisdom to their initiatives. She worked closely with the Foundation's staff, training them to understand the complex needs of families in crisis and to approach their work with empathy rather than condescension. Ethan, meanwhile, had found a new balance in his professional life. The Westlake acquisition had been successfully completed, strengthening Quantum Capital's market position and silencing any remaining board concerns about his leadership. But he no longer defined himself solely by business metrics and market share. 3 days a week he left the office by 5 to have dinner with Sarah and Lily. Sundays were reserved entirely for them, outings to museums, picnics in the park, or simple afternoons spent in their apartment, building puzzles and reading stories. This particular Sunday found them in Central Park, enjoying the spring sunshine. Lily, now nearly 5, raced ahead on the path, her honey-blonde hair bouncing in pigtails, stopping occasionally to examine a flower or watch a squirrel before running back to report her discoveries. "She has so much energy," Sarah observed, smiling as Lily dashed off again. "The teachers at her preschool can barely keep up." Like her mother, Ethan noted. In the months since her recovery, Sarah had blossomed, regaining her health, excelling at her teaching job, and becoming a respected voice at the foundation. Her quiet confidence and resilience continued to impress him daily. Sarah laughed. "I don't know about that. By the end of the school day, I'm exhausted. 24-year-olds will do that to you." They walked in comfortable silence for a moment, following Lily's zigzag path through the park. Over the past months, their relationship had evolved into a deep friendship built on mutual respect and shared purpose. Ethan valued Sarah's perspective on everything from foundation decisions to business ethics, while she had come to trust his judgment and appreciate his unwavering support. And then there was Lily, the bright, vibrant center of this unexpected connection. She had adapted to her new life with remarkable resilience, thriving in preschool, making friends easily, and maintaining her natural curiosity and enthusiasm. She spoke often of the time before, when she and her mother had no home but without fear or bitterness, simply as part of her story, a chapter that had ended. "The castle without doors opens next week," Ethan said, as they paused near the boating lake. "Will you and Lily come to the ribbon cutting?" "Of course," Sarah replied. "Lily's been practicing her scissors skills specifically for this occasion. She takes her role as inspiration very seriously." Ethan smiled, recalling how the name had come about. During one of their Sunday dinners, Lily had asked about his work at the foundation. As he explained their plans to create housing for families like hers and Sarah's had been, Lily had grown thoughtful. "It should be like a castle," she had declared, "because everyone deserves to feel like a prince or princess, but with no doors. That lock people out, because on the street all the doors are closed." The simple wisdom of her statement had struck everyone at the table. The next day, Ethan had presented the concept to the foundation board, and Castle Without Doors had become not just the name of their first building, but the guiding philosophy of their approach. "I've been thinking," Ethan said, watching Lily feed ducks at the edge of the lake, Sarah's hand protectively near her back, "about expanding the foundation's work." Sarah looked at him curiously. "In what way?" "The housing piece is essential, but it's just one part of the puzzle. What about employment? So many of the families we're working with struggle to find stable jobs that pay enough to afford housing in this city." Sarah nodded, considering. "It's the cycle we got caught in. Without an address, you can't get a job. Without a job, you can't get an address." "Exactly. So what if we created a business incubator specifically for parents who've experienced homelessness, provide seed funding, mentorship, flexible workspace with on-site childcare?" "That's actually brilliant," Sarah said, her expression animated, "especially for parents with skills or ideas, but no access to traditional business networks. It would create sustainable independence, not just temporary assistance." "You could help design the childcare component," Ethan suggested. "Create a model program that supports both children's development and parents' professional growth." Sarah was already nodding, her mind clearly racing with possibilities. "We could partner with the preschool where I teach. They've been looking for community outreach opportunities." This was what Ethan loved about their conversations, the way they built on each other's ideas, combining his business acumen with her practical experience and educational expertise. Together they created solutions neither could have developed alone. "Ethan, Mommy, look what I found," Lily called, running toward them with something clutched carefully in her hands. She opened her palms to reveal a small, smooth stone in the shape of a heart. "It's a love rock," she announced proudly. "The ducks showed me where it was." "It's beautiful," Sarah said, examining the stone with appropriate seriousness. "Very special," Ethan agreed. "What will you do with it?" Lily considered the question with the gravity of a Supreme Court justice. "I think," she said finally, "it should go in our special box, with the other important things." The special box was a decorated shoebox in their apartment that contained treasures from their journey together, Lily's hospital wristband, a dried flower from their first park visit after Sarah's recovery, the original drawing Lily had made for Ethan of the two of them holding hands. "An excellent choice," Sarah approved, helping Lily tuck the stones safely into her pocket. As they continued their walk, Ethan found himself reflecting on how thoroughly his definition of success had changed. 6 months ago, it had been measured in acquisitions completed, market share gained, personal wealth accumulated. Now it encompassed so much more: families housed, lives stabilized, a small girl's growth and happiness, a meaningful partnership with a woman whose strength and wisdom he admired more each day. The castle in the sky, as Lily still called, his penthouse, felt increasingly empty and sterile compared to the warm, cluttered apartment in Brooklyn Heights, where Sunday dinners had become the highlight of his week. He had found himself lingering later each time, reluctant to return to his sleek, solitary space after evenings filled with Lily's chatter and Sarah's quiet laughter. "Penny for your thoughts," Sarah said, breaking into his reverie. "You look very serious all of a sudden." "Just thinking about change," Ethan admitted. "How different everything is from when we first met." Sarah's expression softened. "Good different?" "The best different," he confirmed. "I never expected." "No," she said simply. "Me neither." They had reached the playground, where Lily immediately ran to join a group of children on the climbing structure. Sarah found a bench with a good view, and they sat together, watching Lily navigate the equipment with growing confidence. "Victor Sutton contacted me," Ethan said after a moment. "He wants to contribute to the foundation, anonymously, of course. Says he was impressed by our approach." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "The same Victor Sutton who tried to destroy your reputation and use Lily as ammunition." "The very one," Ethan confirmed with a wry smile. "Apparently, our success has made him reconsider his position. Or more likely, he's realized there's social capital to be gained by association with the foundation now that it's becoming influential." "What did you tell him?" "That we'd welcome his contribution, provided he was willing to also donate his time, specifically by teaching financial literacy classes to the families in our programs." Sarah laughed. "I would pay to see that. Victor Sutton explaining budgeting to someone who's had to feed a family on food stamps." "He agreed," Ethan said, still somewhat surprised by this development. "First session is next month. I think it might actually be good for him. Perspective altering. Like finding a child in a box was for you." Sarah suggested gently. "Exactly like that," Ethan acknowledged, though probably less dramatic. They fell into comfortable silence, watching Lily make her way across the monkey bars, her face scrunched in concentration. When she reached and she looked over at them with an expression of triumph that made Ethan's heart swell with pride. "Sarah," he said, his eyes still on Lily, "I've been thinking about something else too." "Hmm?" she responded, clapping as Lily took a theatrical bow after her monkey bar success. "My lease on the penthouse is up next month." This caught her attention. She turned to look at him, a question in her green eyes. "I'm not renewing it," Ethan continued. "It doesn't feel like home anymore. Hasn't for a while, actually." "Where will you go?" Sarah asked, her voice carefully neutral. "That depends," Ethan said, gathering his courage. "There's a brownstone for sale, in Brooklyn Heights, actually. Not far from your apartment. 5 bedrooms, garden in the back, original details, but completely modernized. It's a beautiful place. Too big for one person, though." Sarah's expression remained unreadable. "Sounds lovely." "I thought," Ethan continued, his heart racing now, "it might be perfect for a family. Plenty of room to grow. Great school district. Walking distance to the park. A family. Sarah repeated softly. Our family, Ethan clarified, taking her hand. If you and Lily would consider it. No pressure, no rush. I know we've only known each other a few months and it's complicated, and there's a lot to consider. But I love you, Sarah. I think I have since that day in the recovery center, when I saw how fiercely you loved your daughter, and I love Lily as if she were my own. I want to build a life with both of you, if you'll have me. Sarah was silent. For a long moment, her eyes searching his face. You're serious, she said finally. Completely serious, Ethan confirmed. I've never been more certain of anything. What about Quantum? The board? All those people who thought I was a distraction? A liability? They've come around, Ethan said. The Foundation's success has changed a lot of minds, but even if they hadn't, it wouldn't matter. What we have, what we've built together, is more important than any corporate approval. Sarah looked away, watching Lily, who was now organizing some sort of game with the other children, clearly taking a leadership role. She asks about you, you know, when you're not there, wants to know when you're coming back, if you'll read her favorite story, if you remembered the promise to teach her chess. I would never break a promise to her, Ethan said softly, or to you. Sarah turned back to him, her eyes bright with unshed tears. I never expected this. After everything fell apart, after we ended up on the streets, I thought our story was over, that the best I could hope for was basic survival for Lily. She shook her head in wonder. And now here we are, with possibilities I couldn't have imagined. Is that a yes? Ethan asked, hardly daring to hope. A slow smile spread across Sarah's face. It's a let's talk about it with Lily. She has to be part of this decision, but for the record, she added, squeezing his hand, my vote is yes. Relief and joy flooded through Ethan. He brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. I can work with that. They called Lily over from the playground and she came running, her cheeks flushed with exertion and excitement from her games. Lily, Sarah began, pulling her daughter onto her lap. Ethan has something he wants to ask us, something important that would change things for our family. Lily looked from her mother to Ethan, her blue eyes serious. What kind of change? Good change or bad change? I think it would be good change, Ethan said carefully, but we want your opinion too. You see, I've found a big house with a garden where we could all live together, you, your mom, and me. We could be a family all in one home instead of going back and forth between apartments. Lily considered this, her small face thoughtful. Would I still have my purple bed? Absolutely, Ethan assured her, and your own room to decorate however you want, and maybe even a playroom just for your toys and art supplies. Would you be there every day, even mornings? Every day, Ethan promised. Mornings, evenings, weekends, I'd be there to take you to school sometimes, and for dinner every night, and to read bedtime stories. Lily looked at her mother. And you too, Mommy. You'd be there too. Yes, sweetheart, Sarah assured her. We'd all be together. But only if that's what you want too. This is a family decision. Lily was quiet for a moment, processing this information with the seriousness she brought to all important matters. Then she looked up at Ethan, her expression suddenly vulnerable. Would you be my daddy? She asked softly. I never had a daddy before. Ethan felt his throat tighten with emotion. If that's what you would like, he managed, nothing would make me prouder than to be your daddy. Lily nodded decisively. Then yes, we should all live in the garden house together and be a real family. She paused, then added with the impeccable logic of a child, because family isn't just who you're born with, it's who takes care of you and loves you. That's what you told me, remember, Mommy? Sarah's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her daughter close. I remember, baby, and you're absolutely right. Ethan reached out, embracing both of them, this small, resilient family that had somehow become his own. As Lily wiggled between them, giggling at being squeezed in a family sandwich, he marveled at how thoroughly his life had changed since that freezing December night. He had set out to save a child, never imagining that in doing so, he would save himself as well, from emptiness, from isolation, from a life measured only in acquisitions and achievements rather than connections and love. In finding Lily, he had found his true purpose. In helping Sarah rebuild her life, he had built something new and precious for himself. And in opening his heart to this unexpected family, he had discovered that the greatest fortune wasn't the one in his bank accounts, but the one sitting here, on this park bench, planning their future together with excitement and hope. Later that evening, as they walked back to Sarah and Lily's apartment for their usual Sunday dinner, Lily skipping ahead with her treasure-filled pockets, Sarah slipped her hand into Ethan's. "You know," she said softly, "when I was at my lowest point, sleeping in shelters, then on the streets, watching Lily grow thinner and more withdrawn every day, I used to tell her stories about how things would get better, how someday we'd have a real home again, with warm beds and full refrigerators and bookshelves full of stories." "You kept hope alive for her," Ethan said, squeezing her hand. Sarah nodded. "I tried, but there were days when even I didn't believe it anymore. The night we got separated, when I collapsed and you found her, I thought it was truly the end, that I'd failed her completely." "But you hadn't," Ethan reminded her. "You raised a daughter strong enough and smart enough to survive until help arrived. You created a foundation of love that nothing, not homelessness, not separation, not illness, could shake. And now look at us," Sarah said with quiet wonder, watching Lily twirl on the sidewalk ahead of them, her small face lifted to catch the last rays of spring sunshine. "Planning a future I couldn't have imagined in my wildest dreams. A future we'll build together," Ethan promised, thinking of the brownstone he'd already purchased, the ring hidden in his desk drawer, the lifetime of Sunday dinners and bedtime stories ahead. All three of us. Ahead, Lily had stopped twirling and was waiting for them, her expression suddenly serious. When they reached her, she took one of each of their hands, looking up at them with solemn blue eyes. "I just remembered something important," she announced. "When we live in our new house, we have to make a bigger special box for all our family treasures." "That's a wonderful idea," Sarah agreed, smoothing her daughter's wind-blown hair. And Lily continued, "We should build more castles without doors, for all the other mommies and kids who don't have homes yet, so they can find their families." "Too." Ethan knelt to her level, struck once again by the wisdom in her young heart. "That's exactly what we'll do, Lily. I promise." She nodded, satisfied with his answer, then tugged at their hands to continue walking. "Good, because everyone deserves a family, even if they have to find each other in a box." As they continued toward home, their current one and the new one waiting in their future, Ethan reflected on the incredible journey that had brought them here. From the darkest, coldest night had come this bright new day. From a chance encounter had grown a family. From one small act of human kindness had blossomed a love that would sustain them all for a lifetime. And as Lily skipped between them,